Hi, I've been a part of the startup ecosystem for a while, the technology startup ecosystem in particular, and I think over these years I've formed somewhat of an understanding as to why you should start up or why you probably should not start up. So let's take a look at both these aspects separately. Starting with why you should start up. I think the most obvious reason that comes to mind is obviously the fact that you get to be your own boss. And no question, that's a lot of fun because you're really not responsible uh, or have any responsibility towards anyone else, but essentially to yourself. So you're responsible as much for your input as you are for your output, which also comes with a lot of stress, a lot more hard work, but at the same time, it can be just a lot more fun not having to report to anyone. So I think the pretty obvious reason would be to be your own boss. So the other reason, which is a lot more practical, is actually wealth creation. So when you're going down the path of entrepreneurship, you're becoming a business person. I think what really works is the fact that if your business grows and if it becomes successful and you own either most or a certain share of that business, automatically you are yourself creating a lot more wealth and becoming wealthier. This is a lot different to a high salary that you might draw, because the salary that you're drawing is probably being spent in its majority, right? So 70, maybe even 80% of that salary is being spent on living expenses, and you're just saving some of it and investing, which over time will also compound and lead to somewhat of wealth creation, but nothing compared to owning a share in a business which is growing quite significantly. So wealth creation would be another reason why you would look to start up. Something which I find quite enticing about starting up is actually that all the work that you're putting in, which means all the efforts that you put in, are directly proportional to the rewards that you reap. So if you're really employed in a company, bear in mind that in a lot of cases you are employed or you're part of a core team of a company which is growing quite rapidly, which means you have ESOPs. So therein all the efforts that you put in will eventually go to reward you. So this will hold true there as well. But in most cases, especially in corporate jobs, the kind of effort that you're putting in, the 9 to 5, the 9 to 9 in most cases that you are actually working, only gives you a certain amount of bonus at the end of the year and a salary. It does not proportionally result in the kind of rewards that you should probably get from that company. So I personally feel that when you are an entrepreneur, all the effort that you put in will directly and proportionally lead to rewards, of course, provided that you're successful. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, one of the things that probably excites you a lot is a certain mission and a vision that you're working towards. And that is something that in its truest sense is given to you by entrepreneurship. Because you've obviously identified an opportunity, you believe there is a business scenario which can unfold, you believe there's a market, there are customers who would buy a certain product or a service that you like to sell. And for that reason, you really become a missionary. And I think for people who are driven by really the mission and a certain vision, entrepreneurship is quite an exciting route. And last but definitely not the least is the fact that entrepreneurship can really give you freedom. Freedom comes in many ways. It could be freedom of time, which means ownership over your time. You're not really bound to doing things according to someone else's schedule. It could be freedom of money, which means that you have actually made enough money over a certain period of time, which means that you don't have to, and you can make decisions which are not dependent on money. Right? So it gives you financial freedom, it gives you freedom over your time, and that can be one of the most exciting parts of really being an entrepreneur. Now, bear in mind, this does usually come in slightly later when you have reached a certain level of success. But you do see signs of this very early on. So even if you're very busy, even if you have back-to-back meetings, you're working all Sundays, at the same time, because you're doing this on your own terms, and not because someone has a need for you to do this, I think that makes entrepreneurship quite exciting. So freedom over time, freedom over money is something which would probably be one of the key reasons as to why you would look to start up. So these were essentially 5 reasons why one might find entrepreneurship and starting up an exciting path to go down. But equally important is to understand that starting up an entrepreneurship is not that much fun. It comes with a lot of frustration. In fact, in most cases, it comes with failure. So you would find that only 5, 6, maybe 7% of startups that actually launch do succeed, do make it beyond year 3 and year 4. And that is something which makes this path quite frustrating, quite tiring, quite taxing. And therefore, we should also look at the reasons why one should probably not start up. So the number one reason would be that when you're starting up, you're obviously giving up on a certain salary that you draw. Right? So if you're doing a job, you get a monthly salary, which could be quite lucrative, and that really runs your family, that runs the show for you, and that salary is very, very important to you. You don't have any other backing which can sustain you. And that probably will be the number one reason to not start up. Because you have to look after your family, because you have to look after yourself. And only when you have enough savings can you actually say that, okay, look, I've got maybe a year or two of savings and now I can afford to try something new, go out and raise money, take a hit of a certain couple of months, maybe a year, year and a half. And that's when starting up becomes quite stressful, when you don't have that. So if you're highly dependent on a monthly salary, then I think you should think again. The other reasons would be to remember that starting up have very low odds of success. So if you actually weigh the odds, you probably would land up making money doing a job more often than you would starting your own shop, which basically means that you might not make that much money, but it's safe, it's sure. While when you're an entrepreneur, you might make a lot more money, but it's definitely not as safe or not as sure. So you're venturing down into the unknown. And if that's something that scares you, if that's something that stresses you out, maybe you should think again. The other reason would obviously be that entrepreneurship is a high stress job or an environment. And you end up really becoming a part of something which is growing, which needs a lot of effort, which needs a lot of time, which needs a lot of things to go its way, whether it's in terms of money, whether it's in terms of customers, whether it's in terms of the market scenario and dynamics, which basically means that a lot of these things are not in your control. It means it could lead to significant amounts of stress. And if you're in a position in life where this added stress does seem a lot more than what it would at another point of time, then yes, you should probably think again and maybe wait it out a while. As a business person, you will come to the realization that timing and luck has a lot to do with how successful you become. Now, this sounds quite honestly unfair, right? Because maybe if you're putting in the right kind of work, you're putting in all the effort, it should reap the rewards, but it does not work like that. Life's not fair. And that's how it works in entrepreneurship more than anywhere else. So you might put in a lot of effort, you might do everything right, but it could be just on the back of extreme heavy competition, or it could be just on the back of market scenarios, or maybe a war somewhere around the world where things change and your business does not succeed. So a lot depends upon market timing and luck, and that's something that you should bear in mind before you start up. Now, unfortunately, what's happened over the past few years is because there's so much which has been written and spoken, and of course there's Shark Tank and a lot of the other shows just based on entrepreneurship, which have actually done wonders, right? They've made entrepreneurship more mainstream, it's become more accessible to people, people know more about it, families have accepted it, and that's great. But the downside of this is that people associate entrepreneurship with fame. And that is probably the worst reason to get into business, because fame is a double-edged sword. While when all things are going your way, it seems quite exciting. When things don't go your way and things go down, and you would have seen this across news channels with different companies, it can get extremely difficult. So if you're getting into entrepreneurship because you think it might give you a little fame, trust me, it's not worth it. So we've actually looked at both the things, right? We've looked at why you can start up, why it's exciting, why it would probably give you rewards, and if successful, give you a really, really good life. But also, we've looked at, more importantly, why you probably should not start up. And I think before you venture down this path, think about these reasons very carefully, because entrepreneurship is a marathon. Building a business takes years and decades. And I think if you ask any businessman, whether from the startup ecosystem or from old conventional businesses, they'll tell you it's been fun, but they'll tell you it's been extremely difficult. And most entrepreneurs that have been successful have to keep at it for a very, very long period of time. So it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. You can't afford to get bored. You can't just jump in, jump out. So be a little more nuanced in your thinking with this. And otherwise, if you really get excited by this concept, if you really want to try something out, if you feel you're in the right place at the right time and you can take these risks, then absolutely go for it.